I'm a 55-year-old white-collar worker at a certain manufacturer. I've been with this company for 40 years now. I started working here right after finishing high school. Growing up, my family couldn't afford to send their kids to college. My dad passed away early, and I had 5 siblings. At 15, I was always angry at something. It felt like I was fighting the whole world. Those were my rebellious days. Has it really been 40 years since then? I sat on a bench outside the company, reminiscing about the past. Looking up at our towering corporate building, I felt the passing of time. Back in the day, our company was just a shabby local workshop with a bunch of misfits. Now, we've grown to be the most popular publicly traded company in the area. If it were up to today's hiring standards, a troublemaker like I wouldn't even make it past the application. Now, you need a degree, and not just any degree, but from a top university, to get hired. Our CEO back then was a real go-getter. He spent most of his time building strong connections with top figures in both domestic and international manufacturing. It paid off. As we started getting exclusive orders from world-renowned companies, we capitalized on the growth of the manufacturing industry in the US and expanded our company to what it is today. The CEO would often have me accompany him to business meetings. To be honest, I hated going on those trips because it cut into my free time. But thanks to that, I got to learn the skills of sales from scratch. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was 8:50 a.m. I should head to the office soon. New hires are assigned today. When I reached the office, labeled Sales Division 1, a new hire had already arrived. He was tall, with sharp features. His eyes showed intelligence but also seemed a bit condescending. One thing I could say for sure was that he was miles better than my unruly younger self.
Hi there, I'm David Thompson. I look forward to working with you all.
After his cheerful introduction, David went around greeting everyone, but there was something off about his greetings. Our company has 3 types of employees: those who are transferred nationally, local hires, and part-timers. The nationally transferred employees earn more and hold key positions. David, being a graduate of an Ivy League school, was of course in the first category. I noticed that David was overly polite to the nationally transferred employees, but with local hires and part-timers, he had a very dismissive attitude. I thought to myself, people who change their behavior based on someone's status will have a hard time in the future. I waited for David to come greet me, but he headed back to his desk instead. Manager, the division head, hurriedly asked David to greet me. With a smirk, David approached and said,
Sorry, I thought you were a janitor since you're sitting so far away. I'm David Thompson, looking forward to working with you.
I was taken aback, not because he mistook me for a janitor, but because of his idea that janitors don't deserve a greeting. I'm genuinely concerned about his future as a professional. It seemed my initial impression was right. He definitely changes his attitude based on someone's perceived status, and if he deems someone to be below him, he becomes quite arrogant. Sure, nice to meet you. I'm Bob, by the way. And no, I'm not a janitor.
Oh, got it. So why are you sitting all the way over here?
Before I could answer, manager called out, David, let's go greet the director. He's leaving early today, so we need to hurry. That was my introduction to David. He's obviously smart, having graduated from an Ivy League school, but there are areas he seriously needs to work on. That was my first impression of David. David's attitude towards me hasn't changed. If anything, it seems to have gotten worse. It seems David heard somewhere that I only graduated from high school, and his condescending attitude towards me grew progressively worse. While he stops to greet manager, he just walks past me without even a nod. Every now and then, he'd comment with things like, Bob, can you use email? Or, do you know how to calculate fractions? He always does this when the manager isn't looking, whether it's cunning or just plain mischief. I wish he'd use that brain of his for something more productive, instead of belittling a high school graduate like me. Also, it seemed like David looked down on sales jobs in general. Apparently, he originally wanted to work in business strategy. Once, at a company drinks event, after having a bit too much, he blurted out, anyone can do sales. You really don't need a brain for it. I really want to move to the business planning department soon. A couple of months after David joined, I heard he made a huge mistake in front of one of our top clients' executives. Apparently, he boasted about his educational background again. The client was so offended by David's attitude that they said they would cease doing business with us. David was called into the manager's office, and even our department head was troubled on how to handle the situation. Seeing David looking so down, I tried to console him. "Looks like you messed up, David, but it's all right. We all make mistakes when we're new. Back in my days." But David interrupted me, shouting,
What would someone like you know? Don't tax so high and mighty. You're only a high school graduate. That executive was so clueless. That's why I can't stand people with low education.
This was definitely crossing the line. I understand he was overwhelmed after making his first big mistake, but there's a line you don't cross. We have many other high school graduates in our department, and some are conscious of their educational background. Just as I was about to lecture David, someone patted him on the shoulder. When David turned around, he saw a distinguished elderly gentleman with a white beard, leaning on a cane. His long white hair was neatly combed, and he wore an obviously expensive suit. However, his eyes were sharp, giving away an aura that he's not someone to be taken lightly. Even our knowledgeable David, who knows a lot about external politics, didn't seem to recognize that this gentleman was the previous CEO who built our company to its current stature. And for good reason, since he has been living a retired life and hasn't shown his face at the company for a while.
Who might you be?
You idiot! He's the chairman. Show some respect.
Our manager quickly intervened, grabbing David to back him off from the chairman.
You're David, right? I've heard the stories.
The chairman then turned to me, saying, "It's been a while, Bob. What's with that odd way of talking?" Even David was surprised to hear me using such casual language with the chairman.
I always imagined the chairman of a major listed company to sound like that.
"You've got some nerve, considering you used to be almost like a gangster back in the day."
Hey, come on now. Nowadays, I'm known as a kind elderly gentleman. Let's not dig up the past, all right?
After we shared a good laugh, the chairman's expression turned serious. "David, I heard you insulted Bob here because he's just a high school graduate. You upset the client's executive for the same reason too, right?"
Yes.
David responded in a barely audible voice.
So, where do you see yourself in the future?
Business planning.
I see. That's the kind of ambition we expect from Ivy League graduate. But, you know,
The chairman reached out, pulling David closer by his tie, and whispered fiercely,
people like you, without any soul or real-world experience, are the same, no matter where they go. Our company is here today, thanks to Bob. The clients we secured until we could be listed, every single one of them, were brought in by Bob. Even the client you upset today was a client Bob worked so hard to get. I actually wanted to make him the CEO, but his wife's health was in bad shape, so he's been fine with just being a regular employee.
He added,
A Harvard grad. Think you can do what Bob has done?
clearly intimidated by the sudden ferocious change in the gentleman's demeanor. David was petrified. I chuckled to myself, thinking the chairman hadn't really changed from his old ways.
Bob, I hate to ask, but could you come with me to apologize to our client?
"Chairman, there's no need for that." David was even more surprised when he saw the entrance. To his astonishment, the executive he had angered earlier was standing there. "Mike, long time no see." I could tell David was even more surprised to hear me speak informally to the executive. Over the course of time, and since we were the same age, we became close friends.
You look well, Bob. Haven't seen you in a while. Is your wife doing well?
Yes,
If you were the CEO, it would be easier for me to do business. But it's because you're so kind-hearted that I like you. Anyway,
Mike turned to David and said,
kid, I don't like you. But if you're willing to work under Bob and start from scratch, I might reconsider the business suspension. Chairman, Bob, is that okay with you?
Hearing these words, I had some farts and replied, "I'm fine, but it seems David wants to go into strategic planning. He once said, anyone can do sales. I'm a pure salesman. I don't think there's much he can learn from a high school grad like me. I answered deliberately this way. Then, Mike, fuming, shot back. Who achieves the sales targets set by strategic planning? Sales, right. It's sales that bring in the company's money. Don't belittle it if you don't know the hard work behind sales. As Mike was almost steaming with anger, the chairman and I desperately tried to calm him down. David, on the verge of tears, spoke up.
I will learn about sales from Bob.
From that day on, David began learning sales techniques from scratch under my guidance. Mike's company continued to do business with us, but with a warning that if David didn't change, they'd stop the business dealings. David worked hard, probably realizing the gravity of potentially losing a major client due to his attitude. I taught him everything I knew. You shouldn't look down on others, but you shouldn't be too humble either. Always be thoroughly prepared before making a sale. And never forget the fundamental principle that purchasing something is essentially an act of solving some kind of problem. David, once a know-it-all with his degree from an Ivy League equivalent, gradually changed. It was astonishing to see how a person can genuinely transform. He had a brilliant mind to start with. Once he was committed, he was quick to grasp concepts, and most importantly, he stopped judging people based on their education. He probably had some humbling experiences with tough older salesmen and reflected on his behavior. His sales performance soared, and he became known as the company's ace. 3 decades passed, and I'm now over 80. I remained a regular employee until the end of my career. While there were more challenging times than good, there were also many moments I cherish. The taste of beer shared with the team after securing a major deal, after pulling all-nighters to prepare, is unforgettable. It felt miraculous for a high school grad like me to work for a Fortune 500 company. And above all, the most fulfilling part of my career was mentoring David. David and I remained close, even after leaving our roles. At David's wedding, I had honor to give a speech instead of his direct boss. Every time he got a promotion, he would update me, and I treated him to steak. When he had a kid, he brought them over to my house. When he built his own home, he invited me. On my last day at the company, he cried openly. I quietly opened my desk drawer. Inside, there were business cards that David had given me over the years as mementos, though I always brushed it off saying, I don't need these. Deep down, I was always happy. The most recent card from David read, Sales Division Head, David Thompson,